Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the eDiscovery channel. This is Tom O'Connor from chilly New Orleans, Louisiana. Of course, I'm sure many of you scoff at that since chilly to me means 51 degrees. Um, my friend in Cleveland, who was at 16 degrees this morning, didn't even want to discuss it. Um, and I'm really happy to be joined once again by James Probbins, who is, and let me make sure I got this all right, the Compliance Risk and Data Security Solutions Engineer for Microsoft Federal.
Awesome.
Am I good?
You got it.
James
Good.
has graciously agreed to run through exactly what's going on um, today with Purview and eDiscovery in Purview, Microsoft, CoPilot, the whole mashugana. We had some of you may have seen, we had a chat a few weeks ago with Mike McBride, who gave us sort of the 35,000 foot level overview of what's going on as he was implementing that in a law firm, his law firm at the time. Well, he's still at the law firm. They're merging with somebody else. But James has graciously agreed to drill down and
Yep.
get us down to the ground level and show us what's going on. So, James, it's all yours.
Okay. Yeah. And Tom, you feel free asking questions. We'll pause. Let's just dive into this, and I'll kind of give you some context, and then we'll dive into the tool and show you some of the changes. As you know, I always tell people Microsoft is continuously evolving, right? And so is the need for different tools. And when we're thinking about things like eDiscovery, we have new types of content that we need to be factoring in. So things like Copilot prompts. So that's why what I'm going to do, Tom, is go ahead and start with what I call the five prongs of our data, what needs to be done with our data. And then from there, I'll dive into the tool. So when I think about this, all of our data, we often think of course, Exchange and OneDrive and Teams, which of course Teams is kind of a component of both Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint, and of course SharePoint itself. But the data that we are potentially discovering is including things like our Copilot prompts, right? And even our Copilot responses. And what a lot of people aren't factoring in, I think, is their decisions that need to be made along those components. For instance, related to retention or purge. So with these five components, I think what this does is this gives us sort of a setup of a framework for us to think about, and then from there, diving into the tool itself. So when I think of
Let me
data,
just, I'm
Tom,
sorry
I
to
don't,
interrupt already.
yeah, go
Um,
for it. Go for it.
Copilot is now not just an intrinsic part of what's going
Yeah,
on in
that's
M365.
right.
Is it safe to say it's the front end? It's the user?
So
Where does it
for a
fit?
lot of people,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, for a lot of people, it's the front end. So, for instance, when most people sign into portal.office.com, it's taking them to Copilot, right? And so, where a lot of people are starting to operate from is Copilot first. And so, you're absolutely, I think, your comment is insightful because with the fact that Microsoft is really putting this at front and center, it's becoming more centralized for all of our types of interactions, whether it's drafting something or reviewing something or summarizing something or giving you research about something. And because of that, it really is something that a lot of organizations are starting to use. But there's also, I'll put it out there, there are risks involved when you're using things like Copilot. And what we need to think about is just how do we mitigate those risks? And when it comes to eDiscovery, and this is where I think your comment is insightful, is because now that people are interacting with Copilot more, we are doing more work through it.
Right.
And if we're doing more work through it, we need to understand it so that we can discover it. And
Very
so
good.
this is really one of those things that is front and center these days. And I think especially with the change, Tom, that they've now, when you go to your landing page for a lot of people, it's taking them to the Copilot. I think it's just really prompting people to use it more.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Great.
Well, so when I think about these five prongs, identifying and understanding our data, this is something that we, as our electronic data continues to explode in size and complexity, we have to come up with some ways to automate it. And so one of the things that you could do in Purview is that you have the ability to find sensitive information through it. But the basis of things like sensitive information can be part of what you're doing for protecting your data, but you can also use that information to retain or purge it. But it's also now in eDiscovery being able to sift through it and to refine your data by certain sensitive information types, certain sensitivity labels, certain retention labels. So even this front end part of what we're doing here is really seeing an implication in eDiscovery. The other thing too, and this is I think really important for a lot of organizations, if you not a sales guy here, but if you get to the E5 license instead of the E3 license, one of the things that you can do for your sensitive in understanding your data and identifying it is you could use trainable classifiers to do that.
Okay.
And that is really, I think, an interesting way to protect, retain, purge your data because you can automate it through this. And what a trainable classifier, just as a thumbnail real quick, is if you think of it as if I were to go to 10 different banks and I asked them, give me a sample statement. And I put all those sample statements on a table and I brought you into the room and I said, Tom, what are those? You'd look at those documents and you'd say, oh, those are bank statements, right? But if we look more closely, not all banks will use the same account digits, number of account digits. Right. So things like regular expression can start to fall apart when it identifies this. But how did you know it was a bank statement? You've seen enough bank statements in your life to know it. Yeah. Exactly, right? And so because of that, that's what trainable classifiers does. It reasons over documents, and you can create your own trainable classifier where you point the machine learning to positive examples and negative examples, and it learns to identify that data. Now, why that's important is you can now retain or purge by applying things like a retention label with an automatic purge to it at the right period of time for specific content wherever it is in your environment.
So this is
which
is
really important.
I'm sorry again to interrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a really, really practical application of AI.
100%.
This is right? Where AI is your friend.
It really is because here's the reality, right? Is that do we ever notice that some people will move a document from somewhere? Well, if we're looking at only our SharePoint site to say we're purging something at this period of time, but the document was moved, well, a retention label will follow that document. And so it will then be purged even if it's moved to a different spot. Now, why is that important from eDiscovery? We all know it's a double-edged sword. You want to keep the right material for the right period of time, and you want to purge the right material at the right period of time. And we never want those situations where we are, if it's there, we've discovered it, we've got a big dilemma because we may have to be producing it. And so this is really significant from an eDiscovery perspective. So identifying and understanding our data, and then protecting it. A couple of comments on protection. The grandparent of data security, Tom, as you know, is data loss prevention, right? DLP. It's looking at the content for exfiltration. But what happens if the data leaves your system and goes out into the wild? Well, data loss prevention is lost at that point because it's already out of your system. Well, is that creating a potential risk for liability if your data that shouldn't be out of your system is out there? Yeah. So what another component of protection is sensitivity labels. And what a sensitivity label does is it controls access not only while it's in your tenant, but it controls access even outside of your tenant. So this is, I think, important because when we think about the fact of, I always tell people, unmitigated digital risk can turn into liability. And who owns that liability? The legal team does, right? And that legal team needs to be thinking about how are we mitigating our potential liability in our organization. Data protection is something they need to be having conversations about because they've often thought of it, the data loss prevention is simply that's an IT issue. But now that we see that we can apply protection to our data to protect it even outside, that's a legal issue that you need to be involved in. And then the third part of data protection is insider risk management. So this is now correlating user behavior with sensitive data. So here's an example. Oops, pardon me. I just forgot that I need to turn my Teams, since I'm in Zoom with you. Let me do this real quick. Let me mark myself as do not disturb. Pardon me for that. So think about this.
Friend of man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So if somebody comes into their organization on Monday morning, and at 8:15 in the morning, they enter the resignation into the HR system. Okay. What are the chances that they decided to do that just 15 minutes before? 0. They've been thinking about it, right? What do we also know about people that are leaving an organization? Are they a higher risk or a lower risk for insider threat? They're higher,
Yeah.
right? So with the insider risk tool, you can connect it to your HR system to where it will automatically, as soon as somebody puts in a resignation, you can look back 90 days to see, now that we know that they're leaving, are we concerned about what they've been doing with their data?
Yeah, what's been going on, right?
Right, because data theft. Is data theft a legal issue that we need to be concerned about? 100%. Think about intellectual property from organizations when somebody's leaving. Is that a potential litigation situation? We all know that's an affirmative, right? And so when we think about protection, I think of it in that trifecta: data loss prevention focused on exfiltration, information protection sensitivity labels focused on protecting the data wherever it is, even outside of your system, controlling access. And then the third component is insider risk, really looking at people's behavior. Are they doing suspicious things, Tom, like lowering the sensitivity label, exfiltrating, and then deleting the data, sabotaging the company?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
insider risk will alert people to this. So that's the protection part. But where I think this is extremely relevant to, these 5 prongs are extremely relevant to the legal team, is retain, purge, and records.
Let me interrupt again. I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
And I
No,
don't want to divert a whole lot, but
no,
you
please.
said something twice now that's really fascinating, that the sensitivity labels can be applied to data that's outside the system. What does that
That's right.
look like? Is it just a pointer that says there's something somewhere else, and here's where it
It
is?
actually controls access.
Wow.
This is what's fascinating. Yeah. So, for instance, let's say I have a document that either I put on or Microsoft automatically labeled as protected sensitive information.
Right.
And then I go and I exfiltrate it and send it to my personal email.
Right.
And let's say the data loss prevention had a threshold number of 2 items before it kicked in. So I only sent 1, so it went under the radar. Now, I go to sign in under my personal tenant. I get the email, and if the email is protected, I can't open it. I can't see it. But even if the email is not protected, the document or attachment can be protected, even though it's no longer in the Microsoft system.
Right.
And what that means is I can click on it and I can't see it. I can't open it.
Cool. Okay.
It's
great. Yeah, that's
and when we think about that, often people think, well, that's a government, need. Well, I would argue that really every company needs this, because every company has a secret sauce, right? Every company has something that is valuable to them, whether it's information that they're protecting or intellectual property that they're protecting.
Yep.
And so that protection, think of it in a trifecta: data loss prevention, information protection sensitivity labels, and then correlating user behavior with the data through insider risk management.
Gotcha.
Now, one other thing that I'll mention that a lot of legal teams are starting to like about insider risk, one of the things that you can do is you can actually set up something called forensic evidence. And what that does is, let's say there's a violation of a particular insider risk policy. An agent can be installed on people's PCs that are, company PCs. And then if there's a violation, what it will do with forensic evidence is it will go back 5 minutes before the violation and put screenshots together of what was going on the person's computer. It will then string it together as video 5 minutes before the violation of insider risk policy itself, and 5 minutes after the violation.
Right.
Now, when we think about that from an litigation perspective, that could be extremely helpful for really showing not just the signal of what happened or the document that was used, but now we're seeing what was being done at that time.
5 minutes? Did you say 10 minutes?
5 minutes before, 5 minutes after.
Wow. All right.
So anyway, protection. So once we know the data that we're really having as our crown jewels, we need to protect it. But then again, back to this retention. We need to retain it for the right period of time and purge it for the right period of time. But one of the things that I'll show this when I'm actually in the tool, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that CoPilot, decisions need to be made. Are we keeping CoPilot prompts or are we purging them? And if we're keeping them, how long are we keeping them? Why is this important? Because it will show up in eDiscovery, and I've actually created a case to show you that in eDiscovery.
As you and I discussed before we started here, just briefly offline, a lot of people aren't even aware of this. It's like this is a new category.
100%.
So it's like, oh. Now I got something else to worry about.
I often say it to people, legal teams, and you get the deer in the headlights, like, oh my gosh, because as soon as you tell them that it's retained, then the lawyers know if it's retained, then we're going to be discovering it, which means we may need to produce this.
Yeah, but when you load CoPilot up for the first time, it's not like there's a warning that's telling you, hey, all this CoPilot stuff is being saved someplace. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Exactly. Cool. Exactly. Yeah. And so we'll show that because that's an area that we're getting a lot of aha moments for, not only federal agencies, but I will tell you every single agency that's using CoPilot, which a lot of organizations are using it, they need to have an understanding of the legal ramifications of this because it is significant.
Yep.
So the other thing is you need to be able to audit your data. So what I always tell people is think of this as everywhere you go in Microsoft 365, you're leaving electronic fingerprints. And what audit does is it lifts it. So audit allows you to say, did Tom look at this document? So Tom didn't change the document, but did Tom access this document? Well, would that be important for litigation? It could be, right? You claim that you didn't know that this document even existed. I didn't change it. I didn't modify it. You can claim you didn't look at it, but I know.
Such and such a date at 10 a.m. Yeah.
Bingo.
Absolutely.
And those, right? And so what we're finding is that audit is now not just a data security thing, which is how a lot of organizations have said audit is just something our security people will look at. No. Audit is something that the legal team needs to be aware of because we are able to look at things like who accessed a document. Did CoPilot interact with this document? Did CoPilot interact with this person? So the electronic fingerprints are lifted and you can tell the story around the use of the data through audit. And then, of course, the last prong, the fifth one, is discover, which is eDiscovery, whether it's for an investigation or litigation or in government examples, freedom of information, right? Public disclosure. And so we need to be able to find the right data and to be able to produce the right data. So these 5 prongs, identify, understand, protect, retain, purge, audit, and discover. This is the framework that we are really working in when we're thinking about our data and really helping not only federal agencies, but I really think this is a good framework for a lot of organizations to work through with their legal team.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I want to go through and talk about some of the changes that we are seeing in Purview, particularly related to eDiscovery. But one of the changes that has occurred recently is with the E5 license, Security CoPilot is now added into Purview. Okay. Now, why that's a big deal is that is now not just the Copilot for somebody using it for productivity. That's Microsoft 365 Copilot or Copilot Chat. But now we're talking about how can we leverage things in Purview. For instance, in eDiscovery, maybe we need help creating a key QL And so you can put in naturally worded language and Security CoPilot will convert it to KeyQL for you. Or what if you have a really long document in eDiscovery? You can actually click a button and it will summarize the document for the reviewer to be able to understand what's going on.
Really,
Or
really,
summarize.
that's a
It's
feature. I think
amazing.
it's a great feature. It's
Yeah.
something that everybody can use. Yeah.
Summarize this case for me. I mean, it's so what I will do is tap into that. So I wanted to call that out because there's been a lot of changes to eDiscovery, growing pains because it's a new interface. And so what I want to do though is tell you that just recently with the E5 license, Microsoft made a decision to include Security CoPilot without an additional cost for it. So that's a pretty big deal and value.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so let's talk real briefly about some settings in eDiscovery that I think are important. Oh, sorry, I was going to talk about data lifecycle management. Let me do that real quick to show you the Copilot. So let me go over here to data lifecycle management, and let's just do a retention policy. And when we create a policy here, sample, and just go to the next. So admin units are basically you can have sub-admins overseeing subgroups. So maybe you have different locations or different teams or different subsidiaries that are all under one tenant. You can create admin groups that really have the ability to oversee certain segments in your organization. Those are optional. Now, two things here that I just want to mention. So this thing called adaptive, what adaptive scopes are is where it allows you to have a dynamic group that is maintained through Microsoft Intra, formerly known as Active Directory, that allows you to create a group that will be dynamically adjusted on your Intra ID and say this person's a part of the group, this person's not a part of the group. Now what you're able to do by using those attributes, a policy may apply to them today, but they are no longer in that group with their new role. And we want to not have to go in and update a retention policy for each individual person or each individual location, but the dynamic group will update it right away.
You're doing that now? You're doing this on the fly? What does that do, if anything, to existing retention policies?
So this is what's great, because what happens is when you're choosing, and this is the key thing, and this great question. So when we say choose adaptive policy scope and location, we're going to choose location in just a minute, but first we choose what group we're dealing with. So let's say we are looking for the engineering group.
Yep.
The retention, these policies will apply to the engineering group. Click add. Now, first, before it applies, are they a part of the engineering group? If the answer is no, the policy doesn't apply to them. If somebody new comes on and they are added to the engineering group, as of that moment, this policy will apply to them. But then when they leave and become a VP of something else, boom, they are out of this retention group and the new policies apply because they're in different groups.
What if there was a retention policy for them before this?
So if the policy is not under a scope, then that policy will remain active. So there are times where, here's how I always tell people this, and that's a really super insightful question. There are some policies that are going to be across the board applied to everybody in an organization. Think of that as the floor. Nothing's getting below this retention policy floor. Okay? Now, beyond that, we get more refined with our policies. So the refining would be this policy only applies to these people or this group or this site or this team. And so that's where adaptive scopes comes into play. The other thing is that takes the floor and starts refining it with the adaptive scope. But then in addition to policies, we also have retention labels that can be applied to specific content, and those can be automatically applied as well. So now you can say anytime this trainable classifier is found in the environment, we are going to automatically, wherever it is, whether it's in somebody's OneDrive or whether it's in somebody's Teams SharePoint site or whether it's in my email, across my organization. It's looking for the content and it will say precisely, boom, this matches. We are applying this retention label. Now we have the ability to take that and run it through a disposition review. We can have it as an event-based kickoff of the retention period. So everything associated with this contract, we keep it for 10 years after the contract is or after the project is over, we need to keep things for 10 years. Well, we have the label already applied, but the 10 years hasn't started until, boom, we say it applies to this project. Boom, it applies now to everything wherever it is in your environment.
Now,
So
what
it's
if you,
really
I'm
pretty
sorry, go ahead.
powerful.
Go ahead.
No, it's just a powerful tool that you people need to be thinking about.
So what if at some point you put a litigation hold in effect?
Okay, overrides it. And that's a key thing. Holds override retention.
You remember we had a question I posed to you
I
several
do.
weeks ago about a court case
Yep.
where there appeared to be some conflicts.
Yep.
But litigation hold will always override any retention.
That's right. That's right. And the reason this is important is I always tell people retention policies are the floor. Retention policies with the adaptive scopes are kind of a refined floor that just applies to certain areas of your room. Then you have the retention labels that are picking out specific content within your room. And then a hold says, I don't care what these other things say, we're keeping it until we release this hold.
The room. Right.
Not going to leave that room. That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly
great.
right.
Great.
So the other thing is when we're thinking about these policies, now, of course, adaptive scopes are optional. You don't have to use them. But now we're starting to see that it's refined not just from Exchange, but OneDrive, Teams chats, Teams private channel messages are separately addressed, right? You can be addressing them in different policies. And now we also have CoPilot experiences. So built-in and custom CoPilot experiences, are we retaining them? Back to what we were talking about. If we retain them, then they're discoverable. So the answer is we need to be addressing these. We also have enterprise AI and other AI.
Setting here is the default off.
So it's not. So you may have. So this is the thing to think about: is that when we are thinking about this, legal teams need to have conversations with their IT teams to see what's going on.
Right.
I'll give you an example of this. Legal teams are often siloed from the IT team. And I am a firm believer that they need to be in continuous partnership. A quick example of this, I went to a regional bank one time. This is before I was at Microsoft. I was just consulting. I went to a regional bank one time, and I was teaching them about the Purview eDiscovery, and we were talking about retention, and we were talking about teams and where teams data is stored and how you do this, right? So we're showing this information. And the general counsel raised her hand. She said, we don't need to talk about teams. We don't use that. And I knew they did. And I turned to the IT person and I said, well, excuse me, I thought you used Teams. And he goes, oh, we do. And I said, how many teams have been created? And he told me the number of teams. I turned back to her and her face was white. I mean, she's just, and she turned to the IT person and she said, well, are you putting these on hold? Do we have retention on them? And he goes, you never told me to do that. Right? And so here's the problem. She didn't tell him to do it because she didn't know it was there, right? And so this is one of those situations where CoPilot, we need to make these decisions. Teams, we need to make these decisions. This is a classic example.
They should do a print screen of this screen and have it sitting on the legal people.
Right. That's right. Because so I was working with an agency recently, a federal agency, and working with the deputy general counsel, and I was talking about some of these things, just mitigating digital risk. And one of the things that was great about it was he said, we as the legal team need a seat at the table when it comes to our records. We need a seat at the table when it comes to our data security. We need a seat at the table when it comes to our data lifecycle management. We need a seat at the table to be advising and cooperating and working so that we understand what's happening, because all of that impacts what we're doing. And we need to be partners with them, advising them on what we want these policies to be. And I said, that's that's precisely why we're having that conversation.
But you're so right, and not just in agencies, in corporations, even in really big law
Exactly.
firms, IT and
Exactly.
legal are siloed from each other.
It's crazy to me that that is how things. But here's the reason. I think, how did people solve things before? It was, oh, just add more space, buy more space. Nobody was really organizing data, right? It was just
Yeah.
like, space is cheap, buy more space. Well, now it's becoming more sophisticated because now the content is more complex as well as growing in size. So it's growing in size and complexity, which has significant impacts on the legal team. It has significant impacts on digital risk. It has significant impacts on potential liability.
Yep. All right.
Okay,
Excellent.
so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop over here out of Lifecycle, and we're going to talk eDiscovery from this point on. So a couple of things I want to call out. One is in the settings in Purview. If you go to eDiscovery, the only people that will have this is the eDiscovery administrators. Okay, eDiscovery managers don't see this. Now, here's some things, though, to think about. One is if your organization sometimes doesn't use premium and they want to use the standard, which if you have premium, I would say always use premium.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the eDiscovery administrator can turn this off. And so that's important that if you have the right licensing, you want to make sure this is turned on so you're taking advantage of all of these tools.
Yep.
You can also, this has been around for a while, this is not new, but you can actually upload a file of your up-to-date attorney list, so it will give you a head start on potential attorney-client privilege material, comparing who was involved in the conversations internally. This is something that is, I think, important for a lot of organizations, particularly when they're partnering with law firms. Get the law firms in early with the review sets, helping you as a company decide what is going on in the case. So what this allows you to do is to have guest users be approved or disapproved by your eDiscovery administrator. So an example of this is, so company ABC has some case. They have outside counsel, and the outside counsel has said, please run some eDiscovery on this. Well, so they've run some queries on this, and they have some review sets. Before we export, before we start, sending it off to the legal team and start, incurring all of the costs there, maybe we need them to take a look. Is this what you're looking for? As a guest user, they can hop into the case and only see the review sets and give advice early. And so I really encourage corporations to partner with their legal counsel early by letting them, even outside, come into the review sets to help them cull things down and understand what they're getting before they simply get an export and the legal team starts running with it, right? Because if it wasn't set up right, if there was a problem with it, I'd rather have them see it at the review set time period than later down the road.
Yep.
Couple of other things, with collections, this is important because now we're able to really more easily identify inactive mailboxes. So this is people that have left an organization. Are we looking for shared Teams channels? Are we looking at guest mailboxes, right? Are we including group mailboxes? These are significant decisions that the eDiscovery team needs to make from a settings perspective. And it's hidden because nobody goes to the settings area of Purview.
Tell me about the one down second from the top there, cloud attachments. That's a huge item.
Okay, that's a huge one.
These days. Yeah.
It's a huge one. And here's the reason why it's becoming more of an issue. Cloud attachments. So anytime I'm in Teams, let me give two examples. So if I'm in Teams and you and I are having a chat, one-to-one chat, and I send you a document in Teams, a lot of people think, well, I uploaded this document, and so where's it stored? It's stored in Teams. No, it's not. It is stored in my OneDrive, and all that happened was my OneDrive changed the permissions to allow you to access that document as a cloud attachment in my OneDrive.
You mean the sender or the recipient?
The sender.
The
sender. And so now, if it's a cloud attachment, it's technically just a link, right? So with the premium eDiscovery, though, it will take that link and say, oh, this was being discussed in this Teams conversation, and it will download it and run all of the analysis on that cloud attachment. So it's no longer a link that you would download and look at. It is automatically downloading the cloud attachment and putting it as part of the collected items and running your review sets and your queries on it as a document itself.
At the time of collection.
Correct. Now, there's also versioning that's done, and when you're doing a send a review and to the review set, and when you're exporting, you get to make a decision about what you're doing with the versions of a document. Are we looking and only dealing with the latest version? Are we doing the last 10, the last 100, or all versions of a document?
Excellent. Excellent.
And the other reason that cloud attachments is becoming, even more important is people are using OneDrive to send links to documents instead of static attachments that we were used to with eDiscovery before, right? eDiscovery, from an email, we often would have the email and we would see the attachment. That's the way we've always done it.
Right.
But now people are saying, oh, hey, let's have a live link to this document so we're collaborating together. That's where the cloud attachment comes from, not only Teams, but from an email as well. So those links to documents are the cloud attachments.
Gotcha.
Okay, so these settings, and then you also can create tag templates. So you can actually have a template that is used in your review sets, so you don't have to recreate the wheel every single time you're working in a case. And then when it comes to your exports, notice you're able to export via a pre-authorized link. This is a new thing that you could do where it tells you how long this export will be available, and then it expires. I was working with a corporation a few years ago, and they were saying, we don't want a copy of our eDiscovery stuff hanging out there. Well, this is in response to that. So it's really the download is authorized for a specific period of time.
Right.
Now, one thing you're noticing probably is a change. The change is that currently in the new version of eDiscovery, we are not using the notifications of hold. Hold notices were a part of the older version of Premium eDiscovery. They are not there in the new version. I will tell you the engineering team is reviewing this. It is something that we've gotten a lot of signals from customers that use it. So we're giving that feedback to the engineering team so that a decision can be made whether we reactivate that. But I wanted to call that out because that's a change from some people's workflows that they were using before. Okay. All right. So let's go into eDiscovery here. And let's go ahead and dive into a case, creating a case. So one thing that you'll notice is that drop down, the right drop down is now content search versus creating a case. Now, the reason this is important is historically in the old version of eDiscovery, when somebody did a content search out of the eDiscovery case, just content search, anybody that had access to the content search permissions could see all of the content searches. Now, content search is like a case where you either are the person that created it, you have access to it, and then you add other people to it, they will have access to it. But if you don't add them to it, they're not having access. The exception, of course, is eDiscovery admins have access and see all of the cases as you would expect. But only eDiscovery managers only see the cases and the content searches that they are either creating themselves or are added to separately. Okay, so I've created, when you create a case, really think of this as just creating the shell, right? You create the name, you create the description. You can see here, is this a premium case? So that's how you create it. So I created a case called Project X Litigation just about an hour ago for us. All right, so we're now in the case in the new interface. Give it a second to render here. I want to call out a couple things over here on the right. One is ellipsis, close or delete the case. Okay. The other thing is case settings. So case settings are significantly important because they impact what you're doing with what you're searching, what you're recovering, and how it looks. Okay, so it's also in the case details portion of the settings. This is where you can add case numbers, descriptions. It tells you the status of the case. It's a premium case. So these things are important. And in the actions, again, you could close or delete the case. But this, remember, I just mentioned a moment ago, this is where we add people to a case. Remember, unless you're a member of the case, either as a role group or as a user, or if we've turned on guest access, then you would see the ability to add and request to the administrator a guest user to be approved for this case as well. So guest users only have access to the case that they're approved. eDiscovery managers only have cases that they either created or are a member of, either through a role group or a user.
Yep.
Now, leveraging eDiscovery premium capabilities, this is similar to what we've seen before, but this is where we're able to find, of course, not just the deduplication, that's a given, but this is where, Tom, we have the near duplication. And what this is doing is analyzing and comparing documents across your entire review set and seeing anything that is whatever your percentage is similar. Goes down to 40% all the way up to 100%. 100% obviously would be exact duplicate, but you could stop at 99%, which would be, boy, it's nearly exact. But this threshold is something that is set by the case. It defaults to 65%, but you need to think about, and it's maybe something that's negotiated with opposing counsel, what are we looking at for our near duplicates? Because it's not looking at exact duplicates, but it's looking across the board for your near duplicates and your email threading. The other thing that you can have, of course, is adding in your analysis here with using premium is you could use themes. Themes are, kind of topics. It will find common themes, which you can sort and filter by, but it also will find the dominant theme. And themes can be really helpful for not just analysis of documents. It can be helpful for even deciding what we're searching for. You may see some common themes and realize, gosh, I need to create a query around that. I didn't think about that. So themes can be very useful. This part here, when you run an analysis, it will cull down, and I'll show you what it looks like so you can see what the filter is, but it creates something what's called for review in your query. For instance, emails that are inclusive, we don't need to see 15 emails of that particular one. For my eyeballs to review right now, what do I need to do? Review the last email, right? It's going to save me time than clicking on 15 emails when I could read one email, scroll, and read the whole thing. So I'll show what that filter looks like. Couple of things, you've got number of words or minimum number of words for themes, maximum number of words. You can also ignore text. This can be helpful because you can ignore text on your near duplicates, your email threads, or your themes, or all of them. So you can choose kind of what you're wanting to exclude. And then you also have the ability to have OCR on images, and I will show you what that looks like. I actually created a screenshot that was just literally a picture, and I will show you how it found the words in eDiscovery using OCR. Okay. And then last thing, just review sets, which is just a decision: are we grouping or not grouping? And those are just different ways to look at your content. So not too crazy. All right. So in this case, you'll notice that you also have the process manager. So the process manager is where your history of your work within the case will exist. It will give you the status of this completed or in progress or an error, and so you can dig in to see it. You also are able to download the report of what was done. You can see what the settings were related to what you were doing. So all of these areas are important because it gives you, copy. Let's say you have a problem and you need to reach out to Microsoft support, and they're asking you, hey, what was the thing you were doing? Well, let's go ahead and copy the information so that we're able to find, from an engineering perspective behind the scenes, this is how we can help you do that. So process manager is kind of your ongoing in your history of what you've done in a case, and you can download it as a CSV. Okay. Now, Another thing is when we look at this, you notice that it's really fewer tabs than we had before. We used to have a lot of different tabs here. So we have data sources. So this is where you're able to add your data sources, and you can also go to holds or here, or you can create a hold from here. Just go through the process to create a data source. Notice we can look at all sources in the tenant, right? So we can search for whoever we're looking for, or we want to say everyone, including groups, or we want to look at just people or groups only. Are we including or excluding inactive users? Now, Tom, this is something that I just want to mention because it's significant. If somebody leaves the organization and you are wanting to recoup their license and not have to have them in an active license state, what you do is you go through a process to put them either in a retention policy, not a hold, because hold it has to be manually released, right? But if we just have a policy that says anytime somebody leaves, we keep their material in their inbox for 3 years. It's our policy, and then after 3 years, we want it to purge unless it's on hold. So what you would do is you'd create a policy that says this person's going to be on, retained for 3 years. All of our inactive users are 3 years. Boom, it starts the 3-year period. But now we can recycle that license, but the content remains being held for 3 years, but you don't have to manually release it through a hold. It will automatically, because it's a retention policy, at the end of that policy or at the end of the retention period, if it's purge, it's gone. You don't have to deal with it. So again, legal teams need to have that conversation with the IT team to make sure that you are putting people leaving. So that is what is called an inactive license because the person's content is still retained, but we don't have them as an active license. We still are able to retrieve that information from a data source. Okay. The other thing is that when you add somebody, you will see that it adds, I added myself here, and I added my OneDrive site, and I added my mailbox. So let me just go add, and I'll show you adding my buddy Joe. So I'm going to search for Joe, and I'm going to add Joe. Let's find Joe here. Where is he at? Joe, there we are. Okay, so we add Joe. Now, it's adding it as a data source, right? Notice we could have added, let me just show you, you can add the Exchange GUID if you needed to. You could add people, groups, SharePoint sites, OneDrive accounts, teams. So this is where you're adding your data sources that you want to be looking at for specific data sources. So this is one way to do that. Notice with this, you can see that this is just a Teams environment. It's a site that I did with Joe, right? So we have a site named Joe. It's a team named Joe. So this is telling you not only what you found, because if I wanted Joe the person, I instantly realize, oh, this is a site. This is not the Joe that I thought. So this is really a key thing for people to see when you're adding things like data sources. Now, if we go and we work with a hold policy from here, so we add our data sources. This is where you can create a hold policy. So I'll just call this our sample hold for James, right? Create it, created the shell. Now we're going to get to the detail. So when we are adding our hold policy and we go to our data sources, we have our data sources of mailboxes and sites, sites only, people, groups, inactive mailboxes. So again, we start to realize we are looking very nuanced at who and what we are holding here. So choosing, for instance, James, and I go to add James, and I save and close, give it just a second, notice it's my Exchange and my OneDrive. Now, what if I want to look beyond this or narrow it down? Ellipsis. Remove the mailbox, and I want to only look at my OneDrive. remove the OneDrive and only look at the mailbox. Or I want to know who James's manager is, or who is James's direct reports, or who does James frequently collaborate with? Those are important decisions when we're thinking about holds and searches, right? Because what we realize is that we may have a group of people that we need to be targeting beyond James.
Yeah.
And this gives us that insight. Or what about this one? Groups or teams that James owns, or groups or teams that James is a member of. So we look at this as a web. The web is we have James at the center, but James works with people. James is managed by somebody. James manages people. James owns these teams. James is also a member of these teams. From all of this, what do we need to be thinking about? So if I go groups that I'm a member of, that James is a member of, well, we see that James is a member of these 4 groups. Now I can make a decision on saying, I'm going to include this group, save and close. Now, remember, this team has an Exchange account for the team's conversations and the SharePoint site for the documents for that team.
Right.
And so again, we could look at the members of this team. Who's a member of this team? Well, there's the whole member list. Now we can even expand from there. So when we're doing holds and we're doing our searches, our queries, this is the new way that we work. Now, when we come to our holds, we can do a blanket hold and just say we have no conditions. We're just saying anything that is in James's Exchange and OneDrive, we're holding. And anything that's in Zarafa FTE's Exchange and SharePoint site for Teams, we're holding. But if we want to make it more of a query-based hold, we can do conditions that will narrow the hold down. And the hold conditions are, you could use KeyQL, you've got dates, you've got subject, but now back to what we were talking about before. Oh, our retention labels can be part of what we're looking at. Or our specific, message kinds. We only want to see Teams messages, but not emails. We want to have certain participants that we're working with, or certain message kinds. Or our sensitive information types. Remember, that's where we identify things like our social security numbers or our things that have a sensitivity label. So this is taking the ability to do a broad hold or a narrow hold, and that's how this works.
Okay.
Question?
No.
Or thoughts? Okay,
Got it.
so let's hop over to search, and then we'll go into the review set. So search is really similar to what we just saw. When I create a search, I'm creating the shell. So I've already created the shell here, so I'm going to hop into this one. And how did I create this? Well, I searched only James's Exchange and mailbox. Again, I could expand this by direct reports just like we saw. It's the same exact process. But what you can do here is choose to create your condition builder by using these condition builder details, or you can go straight to KeyQL. So if you are a KeyQL person, you can go straight there and just do it that way. Now, here's why this is important, though. Notice, ultimately, behind the scenes, it's all really converting everything into KeyQL. But what I have here is not only can I summarize this search with Security CoPilot, but to the right of it, what do you see? Draft a query with CoPilot. Mm-hmm. So what I'm able to do is draft natural language, and it will convert it to KeyQL. You copy it and paste it into your query, and off you are. Okay?
Yep.
Now, one of the things that I like about this, let's say we go over here to adding some of these areas. Let's add date. So let me move this up here. So date, is it an and or an or, right? It's part of our KeyQL, but this is really letting you build it out kind of piecemeal. Is it a date before, after, or between? So we've got those things. If we look at things like, participants, all right, let's click this. who are the participants we're looking for. So it could be KeyQL, or you can be really building your query in the way of letting these prompts guide you in this process. So pretty user friendly. It's become it's become a better tool for you to be able to build more refined queries by actually doing it even through these builders in this approach. Okay. Now, when I got my results for the word peanut, I ran this and I asked for some statistics. So when you run a query, you actually can run things like, not only are we going to find, this total matches, locations, data sources, but I also asked it for things like, what are our search hit trends? What is the top sensitive information types that maybe were found? What is the keyword list that looks for that we can find here? So even in statistics, we are getting a lot better information. Now I can even regenerate this view, right? So let me just go make sure that the query is good. I'm just going to delete these guys real quick and regenerate the view just to show you what this would look like. Give it a second, regenerate the view. Now, when you're running a query or regenerating it, are we going to include categories? Are we including a keyword report? Are we including partially indexed items? If we are we going to want to run it through our advanced indexing? And then, because this is not a tenant-wide search, if it was, we would make decisions on, are we including unlicensed? Are we including on-prem? Are we including guest users? Are we including departed users? Are we including shared Teams channels? So these are, when we're running the query, it's not just the query itself, but we need to make decisions. What is the universe that we're looking for in this query? So query is generated. Now what you do, next step is you would move it into a review set. So you select, move into a review set. Now when you're moving it into a review set, if it's the first one, you need to name it. If it's one that's already been created, then you can choose it. But notice, again, if it was a tenant-wide search, we need to make decisions. What are we moving to the review set? Inactive users? Are we including, the unlicensed and on-prem? So we need to make these decisions continuously as we go through this. Are we moving our indexed items only or partially indexed? Are we including only partially indexed? But this is where we also get into versions of documents. Latest, recent 10, recent 100, or all versions. Legal teams often, don't scroll down to look at some of these things. They can have a significant impact on this. Searching folders. Are we searching items in SharePoint lists? Are we including attachments? So that's something that's broader than just a SharePoint library, because SharePoint has lists and libraries. Lists can have attachments to the items. So now we could even do a query on those items to where we say, include the list items if it's, as we move this to a review set. Are we including the 12 hours of conversation to flatten the Teams conversation into a document for us to look at? Are we organizing conversations into an HTML transcript? Are we accessing those cloud attachments? So these things, and if it's a cloud attachment, boom, back to that same question about versions. So all of those questions are key to moving it from your query to now the review set. So let me hop over briefly to the review set and just show you some of the things that I think are important here. So I did a query for the word peanut, really super scientific here. All right, so I've given examples here of what it found. So I did a search for the word peanut, and it found in my OneDrive this particular document. Okay, now in this, because I have integration with my ability to use the CoPilot, Security CoPilot, I could summarize this document. I could look at near duplicates based on the percentage of near duplicates. I could also look at exact duplicates. But I also can see over here Pardon me, let me go back here. I also not only see the source, I see the plain text. I can annotate. I can take an annotation. Let's choose just black. Let's choose area. And I'm going to redact this area. I can look through it right now. I can look at all of the metadata. Now it's in a review set. Now we have just a ton of metadata that we are able to use and would be exported, but we could also refine with queries using it. Group IDs, file types, pivot IDs for the near duplicates, deduped file IDs for the deduplications, immutable ID for everything. It will even give you the internet message ID for the specific email in your system. It will identify it as a particular internet message ID that you can now search for.
Cool.
I mean, it's significant. But let me just show also some other things here. So we've got, email. This symbol is CoPilot. So what happened here? In this CoPilot prompt, I said, list key points from this document. I didn't use the word peanut, but the document that I referred to summarized and it had the word peanut in it. So we are seeing the prompt, we're seeing the document that it was associated with, and we're seeing the summary that was given from CoPilot. Why do we talk about retaining or purging it? Because this is exactly what you get if it's retained,
yep.
Right? We will also, with certain types of content, right, we can see a lot of different information about this. This was a Teams document or a document in Teams that I had, so you can get more information. This is a CoPilot chat. My chat to CoPilot was, is the peanut a nut? It found that. And it also found the response from CoPilot chat. This again is an email, but notice this one has an attachment. What is the attachment? It's a picture. Now remember, we turned on OCR. So we see the word peanut in the text of this image. So it's a hit, even though it was just an image, because we ran OCR on this. And then we also see Teams conversations here as well.
Cool.
So we can see the plain text of this conversation in Teams.
Wow. A lot of stuff.
Now, one other thing I just want to mention, I know we're running long on time. I'm sorry, I got too excited. But one other thing I want to mention to you is a lot of people are concerned about loop.
Yeah.
Where is loop information? So loop is now, let me just go over here to this. So loop is contained in people's OneDrive. So if we look for this and we find it, Teams content, loop components are stored in as a .fluid, a .fluid file, and it's stored in somebody's OneDrive. So if you're looking for loop, be sure that you're including the person's OneDrive. And then when it comes to people's mailboxes, content that's found in people's mailboxes, it is, pretty significant. It's sort of a default area for a lot of it because it's where somebody's Microsoft Forms is there. CoPilot and chat are stored in somebody's OneDrive. That's how it knows I did this prompt. It's stored there in OneDrive. My sway is stored in OneDrive. My individual Teams conversations, my to-do is stored in OneDrive.
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you sort of the bigger picture with the new interface. I know it's a lot. I did a lot of talking. So let's open up for questions for you.
A couple of questions before we wrap up.
Go for it. Yeah.
Where do I get trained on this? Where do I go to learn this?
Well, there's a lot of, so that's a really good question. There's a couple things. So one thing I would say is that the learn.microsoft account or learn.microsoft links here are really a key thing. So what you do, let me just show you. You go to where you're looking at risk and compliance solutions,
Yep.
and you'll notice you have eDiscovery. Here's one thing that a lot of people are getting tripped up on. It's not the legacy eDiscovery drop down. That is your old content search, your old standard, and your old premium. What you do is you go to the new eDiscovery and you have this list here.
All right.
Okay. The other thing is, there's a lot of partners, 5-Star Legal, our
Yep.
friend Don Swanson, he does a lot of training on eDiscovery.
Yep.
People can also talk to their Microsoft customer success managers. They will have workshops that can be done. So there's a lot of training out there. Lots of people can find things. But if it's just let's learn a little bit about it, I would say go to the learn.microsoft.com site.
All right. Excellent. Well, James, a lot to consider here.
Okay.
This is really comprehensive. This is great. I really appreciate your taking the time for this.
Absolutely.
I'm sure what's going to happen is about 4 days from now, you're going to get an email from me that says, "Wait a minute, what about this? What about this?"
Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
All right, we will do that.
Thank you for your time, and thanks for having me, Tom. I appreciate it because this is a super important area that I think a lot of legal teams are not quite up to speed on.
No.
And we really want to make sure that they're thinking about it from all these different angles. So really appreciate you investing the time with us here.
Like you, I'm getting peppered with questions about this, and this will be an amazing resource for people to come in and look at. So
love it.
I can't thank
you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.